The era of good feeling spanned from 1815 to 1823. It began after the War of 1812 during President James Monroe's time in office. America was unified both politically and emotionally as the Federalist Party disappeared. Democratic Republicans took the reins of America and, while infusing Federalist ideas, led the nation through a morally successful time period. The era of good feeling was sparked by events such as the Hartford Convention and the War of 1812. The War of 1812 ended in December of 1814, and as a result, the Federalist Party was eliminated. They had been hosting the Hartford Convention and criticized the war while the Army was out winning battles. They received much scrutiny for this and were completely discredited. Essentially, they were no longer political players. Therefore, one party was able to take control, commencing the era of good feeling. President James Monroe was elected twice, altogether serving from 1817 to 1825. The second time he ran in the election of 1820, the vote was nearly unanimous. Rumor has it that one voter did not vote for Monroe in order to preserve George Washington's record of the only president ever unanimously elected. The following pictures show how over time America became more unified. In 1796, the country split at a 51-49%. In 1820, there was a significant change in political powers, with the Democratic Republicans under James Monroe with 99.5%. After the era of good feelings, the country was once again divided politically, as visible by the electoral map of 1824. On March 4, 1817, Monroe took office, and competing interests were no longer based politically but sectionally. Although the Federalist Party was eliminated, their ideas did not simply disappear. Many beliefs became infused with the Democratic Republic ideals. Democratic Republic leaders incorporated major economic policies that had been favored by Federalists since the time of Alexander Hamilton. President Monroe continued the policies begun by Madison at the end of his presidency to build an American system of national economic development. These policies had three basic aspects: a national bank, protective tariffs to support American manufacturers, and federally funded internal improvements. During the era of good feeling, much was accomplished. But would this all have happened had the country not been united under one party? This is what we will be exploring. In July of 1817, the Erie Canal was dug out. New York Governor DeWitt Clinton, a Democratic Republic, urged the state to build a canal connecting Buffalo on Lake Erie to Albany on the Hudson River, which flows south to north. The state began construction in 1817. This canal was supposed to make transportation from towns around Lake Erie to New York easier and cheaper. DeWitt Clinton had worked many years to get approval for the project. This canal was one of the largest projects of the type at the time, and was executed by the states that were involved. This project was done through the will of the states. A popular Federalist belief was a strong national power should deal with items such as these. Had the Federalists existed, it is hard to believe that accomplishing such a feat of building this canal could have gone through. Without the Erie Canal, the growth of westward expansion, manufacturing, and transportation would have all been halted, greatly slowing down the advancement of America. Another important event during the era of good feeling was the signing of the Missouri Compromise on March 3, 1820. Due to the lessened degree of opposition in the government, this compromise was reached fairly quickly. It ended the dispute between the House and the Senate on whether Missouri should or should not be a slave state, and whether or not it should be allowed into the Union. The agreement stated that Missouri would enter the Union as a slave state, while Maine joined as a free state. It also declared that slavery was prohibited north of the 30-60 line. The Missouri Compromise was reached at record-setting speed because there was virtually no opposition in the government. It seems safe to say that had the Federalist Party survived, this compromise would have taken much longer to be approved. On December 2, 1823, the Monroe Doctrine was issued. This doctrine states that no European power shall interfere with any country in the Americas, and that the United States shall not interfere in Europe as well. If any interference was made in the Americas by European powers, it would be considered a hostile act which would not be ignored. The Federalists supported alliances with Britain that can be seen through Jay's Treaty, and wanted to use Britain as a model for their own nation. As soon as the Federalist Party was eliminated, the Monroe Doctrine was made easier to pass by the Democratic Republicans. This would have taken much more time and deliberation had there been an opposing party vying for the other side of the argument. During the era of good feeling, the nation was faced with some very harsh economic struggles. The economic distress during this time period can be credited in part to the optimistic thinking of the people. They were happy due to the political unity that came with the era of good feeling. This led to a lack of attention to the way money was being spent. People became careless when taking out loans and spending money. All this carelessness led to economic distress. Had the era of good feeling not happened, people would have been more conscientious of the way they were spending their money. When people are not happy, their mindset concerning money is very conservative. The era of good feeling gave people a false sense of economic strength. This is perhaps the greatest negative of the era of good feeling, and if it had not taken place, the United States may have been more economically stable and not gone through a recession. The era of good feeling was a significant time period that greatly impacted the course of history. Had this era not occurred, one could argue that the events that took place between 18 and 1823 may have been different or not even happened. Without the consequences of this era, the United States would be a completely different country. History can be related to a domino effect. One thing leads to another. And it is important to recognize that the events that occur are held together by very fragile links. Even the slightest alteration in the sequence changes everything.